everyone, and welcome back to the first edition of Crazy Stupid Marketing for 2024. I know you've been waiting a long time for this because we took a break for 2 weeks over the holidays, and I hope everybody had a lovely, restful end of the last year, beginning of the new year. And with a new year, generally comes maybe some new things that we want to try, maybe with our business, maybe with marketing, maybe when it comes to innovation. And if those things happen to be up your alley for the beginning of this year anyway, then you are in the right place. For those of you who are new to the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, this is a place where we have real conversations about marketing. So here you're not going to find any of those frivolous templates that will help you create your ideal client profile or write an email that you can send to your clients. There's lots of places on the internet where you can find those things. This is the place where we get into the conversation about how we're using those things we might find on the internet and understanding whether or not they're helping our business and prioritizing on things that do help our business and not on things just to check a marketing box. So if that's also interesting to you, then you are in the right place. If you are joining us live, please let us know. We have this fancy chat functionality. We would love to hear your questions, perspectives, insights, thoughts, ideas, all of the things, anything that's happening in your brain. We would like to hear it in the chat today. So please feel free to use that. If you have questions, we will bring them over into the show. And as we go, just ask. We'll answer what we can, and what we can't, we probably have people for that. Freeman and I know a lot of people between the two of us. Hey, Michael, thanks for joining live, my friend. Welcome to the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show. I'm going to introduce my fantastic guest, and he's going to introduce himself. But yeah, it's you, Freeman. This is the conversation for health. Where did I go? I don't know. I lost my train of thought. It's fine. This is what happens on these shows. This is the conversation for all of us. So while it might look like a two-way conversation today, this is the conversation for everyone. So I encourage you to get into the chat. If you guys are learning from us and you're sharing things, then we get to learn from you and everybody gets to learn, and more marketing innovation becomes possible. So please feel free to share. And Michael, I know you know some things about this, so make sure you share. Anyone else who's sneakily watching as well. Okay, let's learn a little bit more about Freeman before we hop into this conversation today. So Freeman, tell us a little bit more about yourself and why innovation matters so much to you.
Yeah, amazing. Wow, I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be amazing. And I'm so glad that you were like, hey, let's get everybody talking in the chat, because I think it's so important to have that level of conversation happening back and forth and kind of build this ecosystem of community and talking and all that kind of stuff. So my name is Freeman Beals. I'm with Unbounded Thinking. I'm the director of business marketing, business development, which obviously covers marketing and all kinds of fun things. Innovation is really important to myself and all of us at the UBT team. Really, because it's that need for constant change and constant improvement, right? We live in a world that's more so now than ever rapidly evolving. Every day, every week, every month, every quarter, every year, things are changing incredibly quickly. So unless we embrace this way of thinking and doing things that is a constant evolution of change in a very comfortable and systemized manner, you're going to fall behind. Unfortunately, it's just the case now. You can't be stagnant. You can't sit back on your haunches. You have to be conscious about kind of doing those adaptations and testing new things. So that's why it's super important to me, and why I think shows like this that, move us past very traditional stages of marketing. And I love that you were like, take those templates, go find them somewhere else. Templates are great for maybe some ideas and stuff like that, but ultimately, like, if you want to be winning and you want to be at the top, you need to be the one creating the templates, and then changing them all the time, because don't keep using them over and over again.
Well, actually, I think this is a great place to start the conversation, Freeman, because when we talk about an evolution and kind of that ongoing change, that can sound like a pretty heavy lift. And I think that's why a lot of companies get stuck in, okay, I've figured this out. This is my sales strategy. This is my marketing strategy. We're just going to go with that because it works. I think during the pandemic in particular, a lot of people realized that is not going to necessarily always be true. But because this is kind of what you guys do at Unbound Thinking, like what are some ways that we can start? Let's start with mindset, how we can change our mindset into accepting that this is about an evolution and it's not about finding the answer. It's about finding what works today and continuing to iterate on that.
Yeah, completely. So we have a bit of a philosophy at Unbound Thinking, and that's that the term innovation is sort of used, I don't want to say incorrectly, but definitely very loosely nowadays, right? And I think that's maybe part of the problem to talk about the mindset of it is people hear the word innovation and they're like, okay, innovation, new, shiny, bright, like new ideas, stuff like that, completely different things. And that's not necessarily what innovation means, right? It doesn't necessarily mean a completely new thing. Innovation is also improvement. So I think shifting your mindset to understand that innovation doesn't necessarily mean a completely new thing. It means an improvement on an existing thing is really important to kind of not shy away from that. So instead of looking at it, there's a really core piece of kind of innovation that gets talked a lot about, and that's the adjacent, adaptive, and transformative types of innovation. So you want to be ratioing these out in a fairly balanced manner, generally 70% being your core innovation, 20% being adjacent, and 10% being transformational. So a lot of that means that you're innovating on things that you're currently doing. You're not trying to expand into different markets and new products, but you're advancing the things that you currently have and taking a more measured approach to innovation like that makes it less kind of big and scary sounding. So hopefully that helped.
Yeah, I think that's great. And because I think most people do associate it with that transformational. And anytime we're talking about transformational, lots of time, lots of resources, lots of people, lots of budget usually. And so people are like, well, what we have is okay. Let's talk about okay in the arena of innovation, because I feel like if we're fine, then it's not really the fuel that's needed for innovation to come to life.
Yeah. I mean, stagnant, okay means you're stagnant, like honestly, right? If you're like, yeah, we're doing okay, that means that things are kind of maybe on par where they need to be, or honestly, they could even be, dipping a little bit. And there's a very, people have been saying in business for years, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? Like stagnation is death to most businesses, especially nowadays. So I guess being aware that okay is maybe not a good answer for how business is going. You know what I mean?
Or very minimally, if we're saying we're okay, but we're innovating, maybe we're not. Or maybe we're not doing it right or effectively, or what kind of question should we ask in that scenario? Because let's say we've been trying to be innovative or attempting to innovate. Maybe it is even just like that core business process, right? We're trying to always just make it a 2% better per year. What might be going wrong if we're not accomplishing that?
Yeah. So the biggest thing with that is the fact of a lot of people will say that, right? Oh, we're innovative. Oh, we're doing innovation, right? But when you sit that person down, you go, how? Like, what are you doing that's innovative, right? And they're like, oh, we've got somebody in there looking at AI. And you're like, okay, cool. But like, what does it mean to your business? So one of the first things that we get companies to do is like, you have to define what innovation means for your company, for yourself, right? It's not good enough to just say, oh, we're innovative. Like you need to understand what that means for you, right? So I think doing that, sitting down and trying to figure out, okay, what is our definition of innovation is a really powerful first place to start for people.
And this is one of the things I love, and I often share from a marketing perspective too, is that there's what it means to you, and there's what is written in the dictionary. And they're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. And while maybe a dictionary definition is a place to start, innovation for a shoe, like who's the guy that fixes shoes?
A cobbler?
Guy. A cobbler. They still exist, folks. What is innovation for a cobbler is probably not the same as what's an innovation for a fintech company, or not the same as somebody who makes pierogies, and it's not the same for somebody like Apple. And because of their size and their markets and how they sell and how they go to market and how they like to do business and all of these things dictate a unique way that you create marketing and also dictate a unique way that you innovate. So I touched on technology companies there. And I know, Freeman, when you posted about this, you were like, technology and innovation are not the same thing. Can we talk about that? Because I think specifically, maybe not, I think this happens in a lot of areas, but it does happen in marketing as well, where we think that marketing innovation means me getting a marketing AI assistant, and that means I was innovative. So what's the difference? And how do we need to like separate that when we're looking at how are we actually creating innovation?
Yeah. So I'm gonna pull a couple concepts that we've already chatted about kind of back in, and that'll be really helpful for a lot of people here. So really, again, what is innovation to you, right? So we at Unbounded Thinking define innovation as the right response to change. Very clear, very simple. We're not saying that's the right definition of innovation by any stretch, but certainly that's how we define it, right? So again, depending on your business, you want to make sure that you're defining that innovation properly. So if maybe you are a not-for-profit that helps people, well, maybe your definition is always helping people, like, adapting to the best way to help people, right? Or something like that, right? That's more core to like what it is that you're trying to do. And that can be a really good guiding beacon. Back again to the core, adjacent, and transformational types of innovation. Because we tend to think of innovation and tech, and we draw these parallels to them, we think that, okay, like you just said, I'm going to start using AI in my marketing, and I'm going to use it to write all my LinkedIn posts for the year, or whatever you try to do, right? Like,
just to confirm, for those of you who know me, I would never say that. just clarify.
Just to clarify, yeah. I think so. Let's go back to like, if 70% of your innovation should be core, right? I'm not saying that's what you should do, but let's say it's 70%. You can play with those ratios a little bit, but the majority of it should be that. Well, using AI to do something is actually a transformational level of innovation, right? You want to be using something adjacent to what, or even core to what you're doing particularly. So let's say you use Instagram, because many people use Instagram for marketing, right? A innovation to your marketing on Instagram could be tweaking the types of pictures that you post. That's innovation, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a new way of doing something, right? It could be tweaking your brand voice. It could be, if you're writing on LinkedIn, it could be using bold text throughout you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be based to tech. The biggest example of this that I always share to people is like, if you work in a copy center and you have a desk and a copy machine, and you move your desk 1 foot closer to the copy machine so that you can reach the copy machine either, that's innovation. So I think that unconnecting the word tech to innovation and just purely thinking of innovation as how are we adapting to something, right? How are we adapting what we're doing? How are we changing what we're doing is a great way to remove the thought of what new tech should I be chasing, right? Just think of it as a way of how do I improve what I'm doing to better access or better get my message across to the people I'm trying to talk to.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I want to bring up Michael's comment here. And I think whether you're starting with a dictionary definition or your own definition, ensuring you're clear on the communication and understanding what life partners too, relevant, and business partners are meaning. This is something I talk about when it comes to values all the time in marketing. Like, I can put a whole bunch of values on the wall or on my website, but if nobody knows what those mean, especially internally, then they're not livable values. And what I define as being a team player, having a team sports background, might be different than somebody who has a different background. And if I don't know what their definition is, I can't assume. Well, you can assume, because that's what happens most of the time. But perhaps we shouldn't assume that we know what that means, because it doesn't mean the same thing to all people. And just having that conversation on what does innovation mean to us? I ran a customer service department for a long time. And what I would deem an innovation in customer service could be I'm thinking of the like simplest thing, but we used to do these events for retailers, and they would have these sign up cards. So people would come in and be like, sign up to be a member
Mm.
of our VIP group. And we had one of the stores come back and be like, we ran out of forms. And I was like, well, did you collect them when people signed up? Because we had these like tablet stations. And they were like, yeah, I'm like, you could reuse them. And they were like, it's so simple, it's genius. Like, this is something that I thought of that they didn't think of. It might not see it's and it's not a grandiose innovation, but it's a new way of doing it that makes it easier for them, that saves them money because they don't have to reprint these every time they have an event. They like, some are going to get destroyed and things, but like, you can reuse them. Oh yeah, we can reuse them. Great, perfect. We'll do that. And being in those conversations and being in the mindset, I think, of okay, so let's talk about this, Freeman, because I think a lot of times, so that
Yes.
my brain is
Yep,
going a
that's
whole
a
bunch of
great,
different
such a good
directions.
example. It's such a good example.
A lot of times people won't share those types of ideas because they think they're so simple, right?
Yes.
And so, how do our own brains inhibit innovation by thinking like, oh well, that's just something anybody would think of?
Mm. Yeah. So this is a huge issue that tons of organizations struggle with, and I think people struggle with it as well, right? Like to be fully transparent, I struggle with this as well, right? I have this great simple idea, and I'm like, no, if it was that easy, people would do it already. But I've learned over the years that that's not the case, right? So from an organizational standpoint, right, you need to empower those individuals or organization to bring those ideas forward. It's one of the biggest things that we push through is like idea flow from an organization is incredibly important because so we at Unbounded Thinking, we talk about what's called human-centered innovation management. Because just like you said, you had this idea and it suddenly saved the company time, money, resources, and huge, right? And the reason that you had this idea versus maybe a higher level executive, higher level management is because you were like boots on the ground doing it. So if you can grab those ideas from boots on the ground, people doing it, and drive that, that idea through the organization to decision makers, to policies, stuff like that, you begin to have these incredible, usually fairly simple, innovative ideas, right? That are like, hey, let's just reuse the form, right? Again, no tech involved, right? Super simple. So it's really important for organizations to figure out what their idea flow looks like and capture ideas. And again, I want to make sure I'm not just talking innovation, but marketing as well. So from a marketing standpoint, right? To give an example, let's say you are the head of your marketing department, right? Maybe you're the only person in the marketing department and you're like, guys, like, man, what should we be marketing about? What should I post? What should I talk about? Like, maybe talk to the engineers. What are they struggling with, right? With the new programming. Maybe talk to your customer success people, right? What are the clients saying, right? So use the whole brain power of your entire organization to get these ideas from, right? Engage that different cognitive diversity that comes about, right? And people looking at things through a different lens, and use that, right? And set up. The biggest thing is the reason that people don't do it is because they have no system behind it to make it happen, right? And so that makes people kind of fearful of kind of putting it out there, right? Because there's no easy way to do it. Now, if we're talking psychology, human beings don't do things that require a lot of friction. We want to go frictionless. So if it's easier to not bring up the idea than it is to bring the idea up, or if it's very challenging, if you make it hard for people to bring ideas forward, they're not going to, right? Some people might, but most people won't because there's a lot of friction involved. So you want to remove those barriers of friction between them having a good idea and then explain that good idea to the organization. And, really quickly, last touch on the psychology of this here. We as human beings are innovative. It's what we do. It's how we think. It's how we've gotten this far in life. It's what our brains are adapted to do. Unfortunately, society is very good at squashing ideas. And, we're told right from a young age, like, oh no, like, listen to the adults. That's not a good idea and stuff like that, right? So allowing people that you work with and yourself to get comfortable in sharing these ideas, even if they're wrong, I think is the approach that you need to take, right? It's this whole fail fast mentality, right?
Mhm.
Have the ideas, do the thing wrong, learn from the thing, and keep moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. I got to go to the chat because there's some good
Yeah.
stuff happening here.
Yeah,
So
there's some
Tim
stuff
is
coming in for
sharing.
sure.
There's a bing, bing, bing. Human nature likes certainty. Systems bring certainty. Boom. And I think something too when we talk about systems is you don't have to be like overly complex systems,
No.
right? There is such thing as simple systems that can make these things run. And I think our brain also tends to think like, oh, systematize. Now that's a big, deep activity. And yes, it's probably going to touch all areas of your organization, but does it have to be complicated?
No, and I think this is a big thing that we try to overcome in Unbounded Thinking is how do we simplify things, right? Because again, you're right. If we're talking idea flow, and this is people get caught on this, right? They're like, oh, I need like a program that has an input and has a form, and people can put the thing into the form, and then it gets put, and it's like, or you have a whiteboard with 3 columns and a pile of sticky notes. And if somebody has an idea, they write it on the sticky note and they stick it under the column that's representative of where it needs to go. You have idea flow in your organization. Like, sure, can you refine it later on? 100%, but just start doing it, right? Mm-hmm. Like a suggestion box, which is about the easiest kind of thing you can put together, was the original form of idea flow in an organization, right? Suggestion box aren't great. Sticky notes on a whiteboard are better than suggestion box. But again, any form of capturing ideas is better than not.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's actually funny because I had a conversation with a client earlier today and we're working on like how can we get ideas out of his head for social media. And he was like, I was like, well, you could just send me like a recording of one of your sales calls and that would be like your ideas. We could hear what you would say. And he's like, I don't really like not super comfortable. I don't think prospects like appreciate that. So I don't want to do that. But I could like send you a debrief after each call. And I was like, yeah, that's great. Or depending on how much time that takes you, we could just have like a once a month, a 30-minute call, and you could tell me like the 10 things that came up the most, and we can write posts about that. And we haven't decided on which way we're going to go yet, but the demonstration is that there's lots of different ways to make this happen. And I think a lot of times, I think marketing is partially to be held responsible for this, but we try to convince people that there's one way to do it, right? That there's one way to market. There's one way to have an email funnel. There's one way to run a podcast. There's one way. And there just isn't one way. There's lots of ways. And this is why I like shows like this and even like all of the comments, and I'll get back to them because Shannon has some great thoughts in there. This is like evolutionary. Right? This is an opportunity to explore through thought, through conversation, like what could be possible. And maybe some of the things that we talk about, probably some of the things that we talk about sound not quite right for your organization. Like, I don't think that we would really do it that way or that would work for us. That's a huge win that I would like to celebrate for people. Because if you're listening and that's an experience you're having, that's great. Because what you are doing is you're hearing something and you're trying it on to see if it fits you and your organization. And this is what I encourage with marketing. This is what the Unbound Thinking team encourages with innovation, is that this is about finding your way of doing things. And unless we have that skill set of being able to hear and discuss and ask questions and try things on, we can't figure out what's right for us. We will forever be at the mercy of whoever has the most marketing budget to tell you what you should be doing today.
And I think one of the biggest things too that, and this goes for marketing, and also this is a huge thing with innovation as well. So both of these things are super important. A lot of the times we do these idea captures or these thought things in these like one-off kind of bits, right? We have an innovation week, or we do a team building experience, or we get the marketing team together and we go, okay, what are we gonna do Q1 and Q2 for our marketing? And we spend a day, and then that's the end of it, right? And then so we lose all the other chances to grab those good ideas and those good things, right? Which is, again, back to the system, why you need to systemize the ability to capture those things and act on them, not just once a quarter, not just once a month, but continually, both with your innovation and your marketing. It needs to be continually evolving, not 4 times a year evolving, right?
I would say, I mean, I've been in a lot of those quarterly management meetings, and I would say there's not a lot of evolution that happens
Yeah.
in there. Oh, here's
Especially in
the
marketing,
KPI.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it moves so fast, right? Marketing moves so quickly. Trends move quickly. Like if you were to do those on a quarterly basis, you would be so far behind. It needs to be continual. It needs to be looked at all the time. And so you have to have a system in place to do that, because
Yeah.
otherwise it doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shannon, your co-compatriot
There
over
he
at
is.
UBT, idea flow is key. And I love this concept, actually. I haven't heard it put in those words about the idea flow, because I think these are the types of things too, if we can break down the language barriers and we start to look at innovation as idea flow, because idea flow is what has to happen first before we can facilitate innovation, then we can look at, okay, how do ideas flow, right? And where might along the lines ideas be being smushed, right? And I think okay, I'm going to go to Shannon's comments and I'm going to come back to this because I keep thinking about.
For sure. Let's cover some of these comments.
Okay. So Shannon, who is actually, when we're talking about the psychology of this, Shannon knows business psychologist, folks. So if you're looking to be friends with a business psychologist, connect with her. But she's sharing a couple really interesting pieces about our brains. So one of the challenges of our brains is once we learn something, we have a hard time remembering what we learned. And I think this is pretty common, especially things. I think about this about conferences all the time, right? You don't go to a conference, you learn a thing, but you don't have a system to put your learnings into practice. So therefore, we forgot the thing. And then secondly, we really struggle to remember what we thought, believed, did before we learned that thing, which I always say is like the riding the bike phenomenon, right? Once you learn how to ride a bike, you don't really forget how to ride a bike. You might like be a little wobbly or or like less confident in your skills, but you didn't forget how to ride a bike. So then we like, what did we do before? And sometimes it doesn't matter what we did before. I always think about this experience I had too, and we had a young employee who came into the company, and the company had used like Jira and Confluence for project management for a long time, which is not really it's for development flow, but we kind of had hacked it. So we were using it for project management. And then we had this new person come in and she was like, have you heard of Asana? And I was like, no, I haven't heard of Asana. But I am down to learn new things. So like, let's take a look. And I had our entire team use both systems for a month. Like, I want to duplicate all of the things in both places because I want to understand like what feels easy and what in one place, what feels hard in one place. And we can make a team decision on like what feels easiest. And we ended up after the 30 days wholeheartedly switching to Asana because the amount of hacking we were doing was insane. That's because a new person was like, have you heard of this? And we had at least the department culture to explore new ideas. So this is something I wanted to come back to because my brain keeps going, culture, like a culture of innovation. It's not like an activity, it's a way of being. So is that something you would agree with?
Okay. Culture of this is another one of those like tech equals innovation. Culture. I want to make a culture of innovation, right? I'm gonna put slides in the office and foosball tables. Like now we have this great work culture. So having a culture of innovation really drives into the whole thing that we were chatting about with like having that idea flow and building a system behind it, right? So you can't just in the business go, we want to be innovative, we want to have a culture of innovation. Like, what does that mean for your organization and how do you do it? What is the system? So, and the reason that people get hung up on this is because we believe that in order to have like a fun business culture or any kind of culture, right, that it needs to sort of be like this kind of background thing that just sort of starts to happen, which in small teams it can, right? If you're 5 people, whatever, right, you will develop a business culture. A big organization, though, doesn't just develop a business culture. I think about this the same way that we think about forming habits and stuff like that as a human being, right? You don't just become somebody who exercises, right? You have to go to the gym and you have to put a system in place to make sure that you keep going to the gym. And eventually it becomes part of your behavior. It is the same thing in a business. You can't just expect a business to suddenly start being something unless you put something in place, you systemize a thing, and then eventually it'll seem like 2 years down the road, oh, they have a innovative culture. Yeah, because they put the system in place to become an innovative organization, and now it's part of their culture. You can't, it's like the whole cart before the horse thing, right?
Right. Well, I think at the end
a
of the
little
day,
bit of a rant,
really
but sorry.
no, rants are welcome on this show, even encouraged. But I think this is the point is that this is like a human practice, right? Like innovation doesn't just happen, creativity doesn't just happen. This was something. So I'm a big Disney fan, but when Disney mandated their staff to go back to the office, I was like very confused because the argument was that they needed to be in person to be creative. And I was like, if your goal is to be creative, then can't you be creative about how people could accomplish that remotely? I mean, like,
Yeah.
I'm confused by this conversation here because it looks like a lack of creativity instead of an investment in creativity. And I see this parallels in innovation is that we say we can't innovate unless we're all in the office together. Well, that's a pretty limited mindset for innovation. If our goal was to explore how could we be more innovative and we have people who are remote and or hybrid, we want to encourage those people to be innovative as well. How could we do that? I love that whole question, how can we, right? How can we is like the question I live by. How can we make this happen? Because it's not impossible.
No, and this is interesting. So this goes into, again, I love being able to tie some stuff together here. This goes great with a comment that Shannon actually made here as well, talking about idea flow. And this, we talk about idea flow. It's great to have ideas and stuff like that, right? But if we don't do anything with those ideas, we don't get anywhere, right? Great, cool, we have ideas, but like now what? You even said that too, right? We have to act on these things. This ties back into as well with like, we learn something, but then we don't remember it, right? And I'll quickly breeze through this, but essentially that's because we don't always learn from just, we think learning is like how we learned in school. Then somebody tells us something and then we have to remember it, right? Not a great way of learning. It's actually not the best way of learning at all. Like we learn best by doing something, by taking information and then trying something with that, testing it, right? So to go back in on this, there's a type of kind of thought process. This goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning, right? Which is why don't we bring our ideas forward? So let's call it divergent and convergent thinking, right? And we actually chatted about this a while ago, Tracy, but this idea where it's like you have to allow expansion of ideas first in both innovation and in marketing, right? Let it expand out. I don't have enough room on my camera.
Go farther back.
Yeah, I know, right? Like let it expand out, okay, capture ideas and then converge again, right? And that's the way that you have to approach both innovation and, in my opinion, the marketing ideas as well that come forward, right? Allow it to diverge and then converge back on what we're doing. And again, to go back to like this whole Disney problem, right? So we have a problem thinking framework. There's lots of problem thinking frameworks. They come from kind of design thinking, but we have our own one at UBT, which is clarify, ideate, and explore. So let's walk through this Disney example, right? If Disney sat down and clarified what their problem was, right? So what is the problem that we were actually looking at? Let's take some time to figure out, the actual what, why, and hows of this issue that we're running into, right? Okay, now let's ideate. Let's, diverge our thoughts out and just explode them out. Put them on a wall, whatever, wherever you need to put them, right? Okay, so now you've ideated a way out, right? Okay, now let's explore if we take those ideas, right, and we look for parallels among them, and we begin to see what are the common threads in these ideas. Okay, let's explore what a possible solution could look like, right? So before we go, hey, everybody, come back to the office, right? Like, let's explore what the other options might be, and let's just do some small tests, right? This is the other thing people get hung up on. They're like, okay, cool, we've clarified, we've ideated, we're going to go with this solution, and it's going to cost $100,000 and take the month to implement. And it's like, well, hold on. Like, could you do a small scale version of that, right? we call like the $20 test. How could you do that in a way that would cost $20 and have that kind of thought?
Yeah, I love that. I have a product designer friend who talks about minimum lovable products from a product design perspective. And I love that from a marketing perspective as well, because when we're creating a campaign or we're trying an activity, this is why I love LinkedIn Lives, to be honest with you, because I'm like, you can try that for free.
Yeah, right? Just do it.
All it takes is your time and a little bit of prep time, but like, you're going to spend your time doing something else that's probably less productive. So let's try it. There's lots of things that you can try, but it's also not necessarily just about the amount of budget. It's also what can you do? He describes it as if I was going to make a wedding cake. And this is what it's going to look like. And this is what it's going to taste like. And I want to give you a sample. Well, it's one thing to take a slice of that cake. But if I just get a slice of cake, I don't get the experience of what it looks like and what it feels like. But if I gave you a mini version of the cake, then you would get that experience. So what does it look like for you to create your minimum lovable experience in a marketing campaign or in an innovation test? What's your minimum lovable? And ever since I heard that, I was like, everybody should be using this, because minimum viable just sounds like, let's have minimum lovable things happening all over.
I like it.
I like it. I want to go back to Shannon had added a little bit of addition onto the idea of flow is key. But capturing ideas and doing nothing with them can kill motivation, death by 1,000 paper cuts or sticky notes. I talk about this all the time from a marketing research perspective, because the number of people who survey you for information and then use that information for nothing, I just always please don't do that. Okay? You're going to survey someone and they're going to take time to fill in a survey for you. Would you please have an intention, at least, of using their information? Don't put this board up that's called your innovation wall and collect a bunch of Post-it notes. And then at the end of the month, throw the Post-it notes in the bin without looking at them. Okay? I think this is where a system comes into play, but also I do think maybe there's like almost a chicken and egg thing happening here with culture and systems, right? If you have a system, but you don't have the culture of like appreciating the system, then you wouldn't necessarily execute it. If you have just the culture, but no system, then that stuff is just going to get lost. So these are kind of things that need to evolve simultaneously. Is that something you would say, Freeman, or have from your experience, is there a starting point?
There is a starting point. I think that if you have a system and then you educate the people that are involved in the system, you can have your chicken and your egg at the same time. Because that's the problem, is people put a system in place, but they don't educate anybody. So if you don't know how the system works, right, or even why, more importantly, the system works, then you're not going to use it, right? And vice versa. If you know that there should be a system, or you know the why of the system, whether or not you think in terms of system or not, right? But there isn't one to do it, then you won't do it. Right. So I think it's actually more of an education component. So I think it's up to organizations to ensure they're educating the people who are using the system on the importance and the why, right, of the system. And to that, I'm going to go one level deeper and go that they should even be encouraging the people who have to use the system in the help of creating the system, right? Because people don't like to have things pushed onto them. Right. It's very against our psychology. Somebody says, hey, we're going to do this thing now. You're already like, but why? Why? You know what I mean? Like, what about my input? So if you can get their input and their buy-in in the thing that they're doing, right? Now they have buy-in and they have a reason to use it. They feel much more accountable to it being there. So that's kind of what I would say is it's about how you build the system and then education on like why you need it and the philosophies behind it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think even to some degree, you'd have to have at least a curiosity about the benefit of having a system like that in order to like investigate implementing a system. Right? Like I would guess the clients that you guys work with are like, okay, we've been trying to innovate. We have not been successful. We need a system. but that's because they have that buy-in already to some degree of that we want this, right?
Yeah,
That doesn't necessarily it means that there's the culture to make it happen, but there's like that like desire to have the culture.
The problem is that typically, and this definitely changes as organizations get larger. So annoyingly, how most innovative companies kind of do, it's very top down, right? So, upper management goes, hey, we want to do this now. And then here's the system you must follow to do this, right? Where it's like, you need to look at your organization like more bottom up, right? Like ask the people lower down, hey, what are you having problems with? Right? What are the issues? How can we help make those issues easier? How can we help remove friction? Okay, let's design a system around that thing. Right. That's the flow that it needs to be. If you do the other way around, it almost never works, right?
Well, you don't have enough visibility, right? Like I remember having this conversation once when I was working at the Brick with one of the fleet drivers, and he was talking about like how the scheduling routes and things could be reorganized to be more effective. And I was like, well, did you tell the VP that? And he was like, no, we are not allowed to talk to the VP.
Exactly.
And
no idea.
Me being like a 23-year-old new grad, being like, well, why wouldn't you want to be able to get the ideas from the people who are doing this? Like you are paying 3 people for like 12 hours instead of 8 hours because the system is bad, and you have people on the ground who want to improve the system, but you have no process for that to come to life. You're just counting on one guy who's sitting in an office, not driving a truck, to figure out what we should do from a systems perspective. Doesn't make sense. Well, it doesn't make sense to me anyways.
Yeah. And what's interesting is this comes back around, in my opinion, as well, back to marketing, in the fact of like, right now we're talking kind of systems and changes and having this information come from kind of, the bottom of the organization kind of back up. If you were to replace all of that with marketing, what should our marketing messaging be? What should we be like? Who's the lower parts of that quote unquote organization? It's your customers, right? Go to them, find out what's bothering them, find out what their friction points are, market that forward, right? And like, I've always thought this was just like the most rational way to do things, right? Like solve people's problems, never assume the people's problems are there, right? Go find out what the problems are and then solve those problems directly. And it makes your life way easier. I don't understand why people try to do it the other way. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, and I think over the years, so like since the 1960s, when advertising became a thing, the marketing function has gotten farther and farther away from the end consumer. We have now become a top of funnel. So we're not even going to talk to like leads and stuff. We're not going to talk to customers because that's the customer service team. Like we're not going to do that. So now we're in this weird disconnected place where we're still responsible for igniting the right conversations and relationships, but we're not talking to the people. And then we make excuses that we're talking to the people because we sent out a marketing survey to our clients and 3 of them completed. No, that didn't work. And this is something that I found is actually really interesting. So the reason I ended up running a customer success team was I was in this kind of hybrid role, client success marketing, and I was like, this is a lot of work. I need to pick one. And I thought my boss was just going to assign one to me, but she was like, okay, which one do you want to pick? And I was like, oh, okay, now I have to think about it. And I picked client success because I get to work with the customers. I get to see the problem. I get to share the problem with the product team. So then the product team can be improving the digital product all the time. I can inform the marketing team what the issues are because I have experience in marketing. I can come up with like recommendations for narrative and things like that. And it worked beautifully for years. And then I went on mat leave and everything kind of fell apart. But what are you going to do? We need the people, the clients, the customers, they are why we do any of this, right? Even if you're looking at this as a marketing effort perspective, or you're looking at it from a business innovation perspective, the goal at the end of the day, at least I think, for me anyway, is how can we serve the clients better? And if we're not in a close enough or meaningful enough relationship with the customers to get that information out of them, then marketing and innovation efforts or marketing innovation efforts are probably all going to fall flat on their face.
100%. And that's, and this is where I think, again, people get caught up in like, they'd be like, oh, I have to be like, we have to be doing innovation, or we have to be doing, quote unquote market research to kind of make these things happen. Right. Where it's like, there's different ways to approach this. So a great example, and I know I'm going to give people just a little bit of tactic here. It's like, let's say you don't have the resources to send out tons of customer surveys, or you know what I mean? Like, but maybe if you're a small team or whatever, like have your social media people comment on things, create this community level, which is, we could get into why community is important, but like just comment on people's comments and engage in conversation with people on social media platforms on your post. You know what that does? Now you're talking directly to your consumers, right? And you're boosting the algorithm of your post by having communications happening on it. And you're building a community, right? Like no customer research was done, no surveys were sent out, but you're beginning to understand the quote unquote pulse of your consumers while boosting your marketing efforts.
Double win. This is something I promote all the time, but the number of, again, this is what these types of things frustrate me about marketing. It's the social media manager's job to post on social media. They are measured on how many posts they make, not how many comments, not how many conversations are ignited off of that post, but how many posts. So that's what people do. And then we give them ridiculous numbers like you have to post 8 times every day and on all of these platforms. Okay, well, now that person doesn't even have enough time to comment if they wanted to. And they don't have time to come up with something unique. So now they're just copy and pasting stuff everywhere, which isn't helpful. We're like, I think maybe because of our access to a lot of immediate gratification things, Amazon, I blame Amazon for lots of things. But we don't give our people time to think. We don't give our people time to do that. Go like digress with your ideas, think about it, ask questions. We don't create space for that. So regardless of whether, I would say this is a great takeaway for anybody watching this, is how much time in a workday do you create for that to be available? Because if you don't create space for that, you're not getting innovation, whether that's in your marketing department or anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And people
I'm
are
so
not
glad
going to
you
do
said
it
that.
after hours. Because I have a friend who also shared with me once. Now, this was specifically with social media, but they are not allowed to use social media at work during the workday, but they're expected to share and comment on the company posts on their own time. I was like, who thought that was going to work? Like, who would do that? Nobody's going to do that. It's crazy. But this is what we're saying, right? We want people to be innovative, but we're not going to give people time to be innovative. We're just going to expect magic to happen. This is a time investment as well as a mindset and culture investment.
Yeah, and this goes back to like why people keep doing the things that they've always done in that way, is because maybe they don't have time to. If they don't have, they're not given time to better that version of doing it, right? Like, I mean, Google's a great example of this, right? They have their, I'm not going to get the name of it wrong, but they have a division that requires, each person to spend X amount of time on personal endeavors, at work, right? There's the reason that they're one of the most innovative companies, right? They give time for these things to happen. I feel like Google's maybe going down a wrong path recently, but that's a side conversation. Historically great. Right now, I don't know what's going on. But
which I think is the general consensus for most of the big tech right now.
Yeah,
no one sure.
Yeah, it's funny because it's, as organizations grow and get bigger, it has to happen, right? Like things slow down, always do, right? You have more moving pieces, which means things take longer to happen. Like that's just the basis of how it works, right? But it means as you grow, it becomes more and more and more and more and more important to have the systems, the procedures, the things in place that make the other things happen, Like you have to have these systems in place in everything, including your innovation, because otherwise it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Because we have 10 minutes left. I want to touch on two things.
I'm looking at the time. I'm like, oh no, there's so many other things I want to talk about.
Okay. I want to make sure we touch on two things because we touched on the tech thing, but I want to come back to the technology component of this because especially in marketing, I mean, marketing is my arena. So this is where I mostly see things. People think that just having a technology is the innovation. But I always like to talk about tech as a white room. Okay, so let's say I'm going to host a networking event and I have a white room. It's a room. I can do stuff with it, but I have to decide what I'm going to do with it and what I want it to feel like and the activities that I want to happen in there. So if I want it to feel like a Mexican fiesta, I do different things and bring different ingredients to it than I would if I wanted to feel like Winter Wonderland. And when it comes to tech, I think it's this like innovation that feeds what we can do with the tech instead of just saying like, okay, we've got tech, check, tech innovation done. Because I've seen, especially with CRMs, the number of people who implement a CRM system and then are like, oh, problems are solved because now we have this software, except no one uses the software. And so there's no good data in there. So you can't get good data out of it. And like, this is part of the training thing that you touched on. The tech alone isn't innovation. And the creators of the tech, yes, those guys innovated. They came up with something new. They're solving a new problem. But when you're implementing a new piece of your tech stack, it's only innovative if you're using it in a way that, like we've said multiple times, moves your company forward, creates something better than it did before. Because a lot of times I've seen tech implementations that create something not as good as it was before, but we have tech, so we innovated. So I wanted to just get like wrap up thoughts from you on what needs to go into, if we're looking at a tech purchase right now, because we think it's going to help innovate a part of our customer service experience. What are some of the actual innovation inputs that need to go into that to make sure that it works?
The first thing is you have to have a way of measuring it, right? You have to have KPIs that state like what does the if we're looking at this as a success point, like what does it mean for it to be successful? What are those KPIs, right? And this is a challenging thing when you start talking about innovation, right? It's like, how do we measure for being innovative? Because it's not just, as we've talked about before, the amount of new ideas we've generated. That doesn't mean that you're innovating. It's not just that you're creating new things, because as you just said, if nobody's using it, is it really innovation anymore, right? Like one of our greatest examples is if, they take all the city buses and they make them all autonomous, you're like, cool, innovation. If nobody uses the autonomous buses, is it innovative? You know what I mean? Like, now it's just a waste of money. So you have to have metrics in place that you can look at and you can measure, because if you're not measuring it, it's sort of irrelevant for both innovation and for marketing. You have to have KPIs. You have to know what those KPIs are, why they exist, and then you have to continually measure against them. This is one of the reasons that, Unbound Thinking has developed our innovation maturity assessment, right? So you can directly assess, is our organization innovative? After we've done things, have we increased our levels of innovation? With marketing, right? If you want to say that you are a creative marketing company, like what are those metrics? How often are you measuring them? And then what are you doing to change them if they're not changing the way you want them to? So yeah, you got to measure it.
Okay, so I could go on a long rant about KPIs, but there happens to be an episode on KPIs that matter. So if you're interested in deep diving into KPIs, let me know and I'll send you the link to that episode. So there's lots of great stuff in there. Okay, I want to I really love this comment from Shannon, so I want to bring it up. If you care about employees' ideas during work hours, they will think about more ideas outside of work without asking them. I think this is a thing that we know, quote unquote, if you're only listening, but we forget that to put into our systems, right? We don't look at our systems with that kind of filter we create these HR policies and social media policies that handcuff people into doing things in a way that they wouldn't. So they're actually disencouraged to come up with ideas that will help you. And I've actually watched like many an employee sit on good ideas because they're like, well, I'd rather keep this for myself. I don't really want to contribute this back to the organization because they don't care about my ideas. So I might as well go and start my own business and create that to fill the gap. And that's happening a lot more nowadays.
Yep.
So let's not be those companies. How about, folks?
This I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that. This is a direct thing that we talk about all the time, right? Is that entrepreneurs are just pissed off entrepreneurs, right? The people with good ideas who are at a business who couldn't act on those ideas, and exactly like you said, they move away from that business and start their own company. This is why it is so important if you own an organization, if you're part of an organization, to harness those ideas and keep that, you know what I mean? Like, you need to celebrate those ideas, bring them forward and use them so that you're encouraging the humans at your workplace to bring those forward, right? Like, otherwise it's just lost resources.
Yeah.
And it's a lose-lose, because now you have a person that's losing a bunch of resources to go create something with less resources than they would have at an organization. The organization's losing the potential of that individual. And quite honestly, the client or the customer at the back end is going to get a subpar thing for quite a while due to all that resource separation. Right? So if you can harness that idea there with that person, empower them to use it, you're going to get a product faster, better. And it becomes a win-win-win instead of a lose-lose-lose.
Yeah. Let's not do lose. Although surprisingly, there's still a lot of that happening. Okay. Last topic for today. You touched on community, and community is something I happen to be very passionate about. So what are the benefits of working in community when it comes to innovation?
So a lot of it comes down to the cognitive diversity, right? Working in a silo is very challenging. It's, again, this whole divergent convergent thinking. And if you're not bringing all these other ideas in, all these different perspectives, right, you're missing out on opportunities for great, simple ideas. That's the biggest thing that we as human beings bring to the table, is our differences. And we learn to celebrate those differences and empower each other to work on those differences. Now we get way better ideas. We get more diversity in them. And you can only have that through a trusting community.
And this is something that kind of always boggles my mind too about marketing, because to me, marketing is very much about creating community. So I'm not just out there shouting at prospects, I'm creating community with people. And Michael had shared, like, yeah, go Freeman, post and comment in community groups. I think community, maybe similar to innovation, has kind of lost its definition and its meaning for a lot of people, because we talk about online communities and sometimes people are simplifying that to like a Facebook group or this and that. But you can have a Facebook group, you can have a LinkedIn group, and you can have nothing happen in that. I've had that. I have had a Facebook group that I closed down because nobody wanted to participate from a community perspective. They wanted to come and be served content. This isn't what a community is about. A community is about sharing and asking questions. And one of the things I loved about today is we have people with tech backgrounds and psychology backgrounds in this conversation all together. And what can a tech person learn from a psychologist about, like, what might be the next innovation for their version of tech? There's so many opportunities when you get into these conversations with that cognitive diversity that you mentioned. And I do think there's still a lot of fear that's associated with hearing ideas that you're not aligned with. But for those of you who missed the part of the show earlier where I was like, if you are hearing something and you're like, yeah, no, that's not for me, that's great. Or at least that's celebrated by me, because that means that you're figuring out what is right for you. And not all things are right for you. Some people will listen to this and be like, oh, this Tracy and Freeman, who are these guys? These guys are out to lunch. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Not our people. It's okay. There are 8 billion people on our planet, and you're not going to be aligned with all of them. But when you can get into those conversations, like I will tell you, this is why I said everybody should just connect. Now we have two Shannons, with Shannon Jennings. Not that you shouldn't connect with Shannon Phillips, because you should connect with both of them. But the conversation that we had was just so insightful. And stay tuned, she's going to be a guest on this show coming up. So if you guys want to come check out that episode on business psychology, it's going to be awesome. But when we get curious and we allow ourselves to like feed that childlike wonder of like, what could happen if we tried this? Like all of the greatest things, inventions that humans have come up with was because somebody was like, I wonder if we could do that. And then they try to do it. And sometimes we fail. But this is also one of the reasons why community is so important, because when you have a community around you and you fail at something, you still have a community around you. That's a group of people that can support you in being like, well, that didn't work. Let's go on to the next thing and see if we can come up with a new way to iterate on that, because nobody has 100% success rate on marketing or innovation.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And I think just to briefly touch on this whole concept of fail, just because something failed doesn't mean that there was no learning in it.
Right.
And that's where I think people are like, oh, but what if this just fails? Well, then you learned something, didn't you? Right? Like take the learning, adapt it, move it forward. Right? It's this idea, again, continual improvement. You can't have a continual improvement if you never start. Start, fail, learn from the fail, improve, try again.
Yeah. And keep going and have a system for it. Also want to share, Daniel slid into the conversation right at the end there. So I'm sharing on the you need to encourage your team to feel comfortable that they want to share their idea. Yeah, we want to share their idea. Oh, hi, Moose. Moose is also here. And Moose is all about innovation too. And this is something interesting. Like, so Moose, this is an example where it's in the nonprofit arena, creating solutions that don't exist for a group of people, right? This is innovation, folks. And it doesn't have to include AI. It might include AI, but it doesn't have to include AI to be considered innovation. Okay, Freeman, you and I could talk about this for days probably, but we're going to leave it at that for today. We'll probably have Freeman back for a follow-up episode because we can never talk too much about marketing innovation. But Freeman, until that time, where is the best place for people to connect with you if they would like to learn more or idea share with you or learn more about UBT?
Totally. So the best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. So shoot me a connection request, shoot me a message. I'm always happy to chat about anything in regards to innovation, what you're doing with your company, stuff like that. Excitingly, weirdly, we also just launched our new website. So unboundedthinking.com, go check that out. It's brand new as of yesterday. Really excited about kind of what's on there and kind of a lot of our new service offerings that really simplify, a organization's path to being innovative. So
and I was on there earlier, and I think I can't remember what it's called, but there's almost like an innovation audit that people can walk through. Is that?
Close. Yeah. It's our innovation maturity assessment. So we offer that as one of the services we offer. And again, I briefly mentioned it kind of prior to, but that's a good way to understand where your organization sits in their kind of innovation levels across 4 different areas. And I'm not going to get deep into that right now, but if you're curious of like how innovative are we and how do we become more innovative, it's an easy way to do it.
Yeah. Awesome. New website looks great, by the way. I was on there earlier today. So for those of you who are interested in this conversation of marketing innovation or marketing or innovation, make sure you get connected to the people who are in the conversation today. So if we're not already connected with me, please connect. If you're not connected with Freeman, please do. But also check out the people who are in the chat today. Connect with each other. This is a really great opportunity to create that cognitive diversity, even if you are a marketing team of one, or if you're just starting to explore, what does innovation look like for me or my company? Or can I influence innovation from the middle of an organization or anything in that arena? Connect with these people because these are other people who are in the conversation about marketing innovation. And if you want to be in that conversation and make progress in that arena, then you have to stay in the conversation. As much as I would love to say you can come to a 1-hour conversation with Tracy and Freeman and learn everything you need to know about marketing innovation, that's not a thing. So stay in the conversation.
Maybe it should be a thing, though.
It would be convenient, but I also feel like there's so many people from a marketing perspective who want to try and convince you I'm going to solve all your problems in 60 minutes. And I'm not going to promise that. Although what I will tell you is that if you connect with the people who you met here today, those people likely are at least going to be the first step to you solving your problem in that arena.
Probably not in an hour. Let's just
not in an hour.
Just clarify.
And these are not things like fully authentic marketing program, a fully functioning systematic innovation program for an organization. It doesn't take 60 minutes. It takes a time investment. It takes a energy investment. It takes people investment. You have to decide to do it. And in order to do that, best way to start, get into conversation, figure out some ways where you could test that simply, like we talked about earlier, for yourself. One of the other things I want to mention, if you are into this whole community component and authentic marketing is where you're trying to focus, I have recently launched the Authentic Marketing Fellowship, which is a group of people who hang out in conversation talking about what is authentic for you that you could try from a marketing perspective. So it's really like a lab, like an experimental lab for marketing scientists to figure out what can work best for you and how you are innovating in your marketing and how to build those skills to continue to evolve and iterate on those things, because we're not here to just come up with one thing that's going to work forever. We need the skills to continually grow and evolve and do those things. So if you're interested in that, connect with me. I'd love to chat with you about it. And if this was your first time hanging out on the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, this is a weekly show. We had an unusual time today because Freeman is in Japan. It's usually earlier in the day if you are in North America, 1 o'clock Mountain Time. But come back, check it out. Check out Crazy Stupid Marketing on YouTube. There's a whole bunch of other episodes if you're interested in marketing, innovation, authenticity, all of that good jazz about how that can influence your marketing program. With that, we are going to wrap up. Thank you, Freeman, so much for joining us all the way over in Japan. I appreciate that we could actually figure out a time that worked because we were struggling with that for a minute.
It's only a 16-hour difference.
It's fine. We made it work. This is the example of how can we, right? How can we make this work? And we made it work. So that means you can make it work too, folks. Thank you all for joining us today. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.